Well, hello everyone. Good morning. My name is Luciano Gurgel, and a quick resume on me. I got into Furukawa 7 to 8 years ago as a trainee, and after all the job rotation and going through many areas, I ended up working with products, research and development. So I started pretty much with products and accessories for fiber optics networks. And then I moved on to product management, then product owner, and all the way to applications engineer, where I lead today a team of engineers for the broadband applications. Um, Before we start, I would like you to be kind and take off your cell phones and scan with your camera this QR code here. This will be important for the following up slides. And I would like to hear from you, and if that makes sense to you, to understand which problems you face when regarding cables. So it could be just one word. You go there, there's just one quick question, and you put in the thing that most bothers you while deploying cables. Today we'll be talking about the best FTTH cables, so the best cables to be deployed on fiber networks. And for that matter, it could be FTTH, it could be MDU, it could be many other types of scenarios. But it will be clear for you. If you've never heard of FTTH, this is the presentation for you. And if you did hear about FTTH before, this is also the presentation for you because we have some good news and some very interesting data, especially in the end of this presentation. So tune in and there will be some very valuable information. Before we start, I would like to present Furukawa, and while you answer the question through the QR code, I'll bring the QR code in a second. But just before we move on with the presentation, I would like to introduce Furukawa as a company. I'm sure many of you heard of it, and many of you heard of it, especially because of the cables. But there it might be news for you that OFS is also Furukawa. It's all part of the same group. And if you look down here in the bottom of this slide, these are the main solutions Furukawa work with from the Furukawa electric part from Latam, which is where we were talking about right now. But OFS is also part of the company. It's all part of Furukawa. Furukawa is a huge multinational company from Japan. And for that, I would like to put on a video while many of you are still getting here. So this will give you some time to adjust and log in.
Traditional cultures in the world, characterized by respect, honor, and discipline, a great story
Just one
emerges.
second.
In the beginning, there was only Ishibei Furukawa, skilled merchant of silk business, with efforts aimed at marketing to the foreign market. He accumulated experience. He changed to the mining segment. He was able to offer employment opportunities and better living conditions to his compatriots. He went beyond. He radically innovated the mining industry, mechanized it, made it grow, built wealth. In 1897, he was responsible for the production of 40% of the copper in Japan, in addition to silver and gold exploitation. He used the wealth to establish an industrial city in the mountains of Ashio. He built houses for the miners, installed schools, hospitals, and roads throughout the district. He provided the workers with instructive amusement, which was unheard of at the time. Through these actions, he created a community and provided them with a better life. The Furukawa Group in Japan worked to realize Ishibei Furukawa's wildest dream: illuminate the land of the rising sun. With persistent and hard work, one of the largest industrial conglomerates of the world grows. The Furukawa Electric Group basically has 3 technological pillars: metals, polymers, and photonics, and 6 business areas: telecommunications, energy, automotive industry, optical and electronic components, construction and architecture, new businesses, and new products. There are several industrial plants and research laboratories in Japan and Southeast Asia, where a number of products that contribute to a more sustainable and technological society are developed. In the United States, the OFS company, part of the Furukawa Electric Group, produces several types of optical fibers and cables, as well as other products for telecommunication infrastructure. Today, it owns hundreds of patents in this area, and its products are used in various markets. Its industrial plants and research laboratories are located in the United States, Germany, Denmark, Russia, and Morocco. In Latin America, the Furukawa Electric Group started its activities in 1974 with power cables through the Furukawa Industrial S.A. electric products. And in 1977, it started producing telecommunication cables in Curitiba, Paraná. For more than 40 years, it has developed and produced optical cables, LAN cables, and several components for structured cabling, as well as active equipment, connectivities, and optical cables for FTTX networks. Through its industrial units located in Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia, Furukawa Electric Latam provides products and solutions for advanced communication networks. And today, a new proposal arises: integrate, strengthen, and expand the brand around the world. The One Furukawa concept, with a logo comprising the junction of the mountain Yama and the Japanese ideogram for one, which represents the start of the company.
Okay, so for those of you who are entering this meeting right now, this presentation, this is the last few moments for you to scan this QR code and answer a quick question, which will be opening the results right now. So this is the main issues. These are the main issues that you posted here. The bigger ones are the ones that happen most often. So pretty much what happens most in the field too. And we can see speed, we can see time, we can see size and weight, the bigger ones. There's also rodents, bandwidth, and installation and effect from environment. Perfect. All of this could be solved by the use of fiber optics. If I move on, and these answers can attest what I'm saying. If I move on, these are the qualities, the features from the fiber optic cables that would solve those matters. Why? Because with fibers, we have no interference because it's an electromagnetic pulse. It's very easy to install because it's lighter, and also lower maintenance cost because there is no active equipment in the outside plant, and that makes much easier and much less susceptible of failure. And the other one, the last one I'd like to point out, of course, is the bandwidth and the speed of transmission. Of course, because the fastest speed known to man is the speed of light, right? So regarding the speed, which would be the fastest way to transmit data uh, through the speed of light, right? Which is exactly what we use here in the fiber optics communication. Moving on to the quality reference, here we can see where Furukawa is part of or where our products are validated or certified. I'd like to point out the TIA, the IEC, the ITU, and especially to the Fiber Broadband, because Fiber Broadband Association is not just an organization for suppliers or for the companies that produce fiber. It's also made of the bigger the telecommunication companies, the bigger players, the biggest players regarding fiber optics in the world are part of this Fiber Broadband Association, and many data, many interesting facts. I brought from their material for this presentation. So this is very constructive. So starting with the technical part, and like I said, if you never heard of fiber or FTTH, this is a presentation for you right now. In the first part would be the simple part, the easier part. And then we start moving on to the most difficult applications and most specific matters. So regarding the fiber composition, it is made out of three parts mainly: the core, cladding, and coating. With all these three parts, their diameter sums up to 250 micrometers. So it's very thin. It's thin as a hair, even thinner than pretty much everything you had contact with. It's very, very thin, and you can traffic information through its core. This information in the form of light uh, functions through total internal reflection. So through different refraction indexes, we make it possible for light to go through this core. And this core could be smaller, which is this one you're seeing here, which is called SM, single mode, or it could be bigger, multi-mode. But we're not going to focus on the second one, the last one I just said, because this is more applied to data centers. For FTTX applications, we will focus on the SM type of fiber, which is single mode once again. And talking about SM fibers, I would like to point out two specific types, the G652 and the G657. The G652 is mostly used on cables that are closer to the central office. Why? Because on those cables, the fiber count is much bigger, and all the material that compose the cable make the cable stronger. So you can't bend it easily. So the fiber doesn't need to be as resistant because the cable will do the work. The cable is resistant for the fiber. As we move along and we get closer to the final subscriber, it is important to know that the cable will not be as strong. So the fiber has to be more resistant to bending. So this is why the fiber G657 is also known as BLI, which is bending loss insensitive, which means that if you go in a subscriber's home, like ourselves, you could examine maybe your network inside your house right now. If there is fiber, you would see that the curves, the bending are much more aggressive than the ones that we submit cables on the street. So this is why we need specific types of fiber for each specific type of region in the network. Moving on, where do we apply these types of fiber or the fiber network? We don't talk anymore about only, just one second, let me bring the pointer so you can see a little bit better. Okay, so right now we don't talk about delivering only internet service to a person working or a person just accessing websites. We talk about IoT, we talk about virtual reality, drones, smart cities, hospital, autonomous vehicles. All of this, if not already reality for you, it will be at some point. And your network has to be ready for all sorts of application, even though you don't see it right now. So we already know how the fiber works. Why is it so good? Why it has so many qualities that would solve most of the problems that you mentioned before. But we also have the network itself. So before we start pointing which cables fit where, we will divide the network in four parts: central office, distribution network, access network, and the subscriber itself. We're going to focus on two of these in the beginning: distribution network. In this, like I said before, is the part that is closer to the central office. And this is the scenario we prepared our solution for. This is the scenario we see in most of the underdevelopment countries. And I'm not sure if that's the reality in your country, but this is the reality that we developed and researched for our solution. And this is a good thing. What do I mean by this is a good thing? Because if we develop something that fits in this kind of scenario, in these types of situations, I'm sure it would fit everywhere. So this is why our solution is being so well accepted, not just in those underdevelopment countries, but also all over the world, even the United States, Europe, and all sorts of applications. So before we get into and we move on to the cables that fit in this category for a distribution network, I think it's important for us to define the levels of evolution in those cables. So the first generation of cables was gel filled. What do I mean by gel filled? I mean exactly that the cable was filled with gel, not only on the inside of the tubes, but also in the outside of the tubes. And why do we have gel? Because gel prevents water from getting in contact with the fiber. Even though fiber has all its qualities, all its performance and features, we have to prevent water from getting in contact with it. It's the only factor, the main factor that could affect its communication. So the gel acts in a way that this doesn't affect the communication. But the gel also brings many complications since it makes the cable heavier, it makes harder to work with. Every time we have to open a window in the cable, it gets hard because you have to clean it, you have to prepare the whole thing. So pretty much the message is gel helps it, but also makes it complicated. So the second generation of cables was specifically taking the gel off the outside of the tubes. And how do we do that? We don't simply take the gel off. We replace it by a tape of powder, a specific powder, a scientific generated powder that will become gel when in contact with water. So you, at the end of the day, you would only have gel where you effectively have water. And what will be the second step or the second evolution would be the third generation, which is totally dry. Totally dry means there is no gel, neither in the outside nor in the inside of those tubes. And for when we do that, when we reach that level with no gel, we reach a reduction on 30 with 35% in weight and 11% reduction in diameter for those cables. But if you don't believe me, I'm going to show you a quick video of this powder I just told you.
Here I have a 1 gram sample of the raw powder used in the AccuRibbon DC tape. This isn't a stunt double powder, it's the actual material. I'll add 200 grams of water to the 1 gram of powder. As you can see, a stiff gel will form in 5 to 8 seconds. After this gel forms, I can turn the beaker upside down. Once the water is absorbed by the powder, we no longer have free water. We have a thermodynamically stable gel that doesn't have a watery texture.
Pretty awesome, right? The first time I saw this, I was like, no, I don't think that's how it actually works. It's probably some effect for the video, it's effect for YouTube. So I tried it in an event in front of many customers and many attendees. And I was kind of afraid when I was turning the cup down, uh, afraid that the liquid would come out and everything, but it didn't. At the end of the day, it is a high quality powder, and it does work. It's not just YouTube magic. Also, right now, if you would point again your cell phone to this QR code, you would have access. We're not going to go through this video, but you can save it for later. It's the comparison in real time for with two people working with all those with those two types of cables. So the first generation and the last one, which is the third generation, the totally dry one. And how much faster it is, it's less than half of the time to work with the totally dry cable. And, and in the end, after working with it, the operator or the person who worked with it is, and the person is clean. There's not much complication regarding getting dirty with all the gel. So right now, we start talking about the products themselves. So the first type of cable we'll be talking about are the underground cables. The underground cables can go up to 288 fibers, and one of the features they could bring is the rodent protection. I saw that you pointed out in that poll we just did, the protection from the environment and the feature to be rodent resistant. And for these cables that are applied underground to be rodent resistant, they can either be dielectric protected or dielectric or metallic. When they're dielectric, the rodent, the mouse or the animal would bite the cable, and this material here would get into its teeth, and it would hurt and it would stop biting. And the metallic protection would be a mechanical protection, so the animal wouldn't have enough force to break the cable or to break its cover. Moving on, but still talking about underground mostly, we talk about micro cables. When we talk about micro cables, this is the tripod and how it works. When we talk about cables, the diameter, since you don't need protection for the outside environment, so the cable can be a little thinner. And also, since there is less material, there is a weight reduction too. So you can increase the density of optical fibers. The second part here regards duct. So in the day one, when you're deploying these sorts of networks, you would only deploy the ducts. And every time you would need to deploy a cable, you would bring a blowing installation machinery to blow it into the tube. And this would be very, very fast. How fast? The average speed for those compressed air machines is 60 meters per minute. So much, much faster if you compare it to an environment where you have to move along, move through trees and through all sorts of obstacles. Now, getting out of the underground environment and going to the air, to the aerial applications, we move on to the self-supported cables. The self-supported cables go up to 144 fibers, and it could be applied to 80, 120, and 200 meter span. If you use the totally dry, like I said before, those definitions of totally dry, dry, and gel fill, they apply to all of these cables. But if you use the totally dry, especially here in this sorts of cables, the self-supported cables, it would reduce the splicing preparation time. For those cables to the self-supported cables, we have a optimized project called the compact cables. These cables can go up to 40 fibers, and this could reduce in 50% or so half the weight and 1/3 of the diameter just by optimizing the project and taking off some of the materials that made it so rough, and you adjust it to a general application. Before I move on, too, I would like to point out that many of the optimizations and some of the cables that I'm about to present here, the focus is always to bring the size down, bring the weight down. So like in this scenario here, we start using all the fibers in the same tube. So the limit here for this type of cable is 24 fibers in the same tube, the same single tube. And this, comparing to the general or to the regular 24 fiber cable that would divide those fibers in many tubes, is much smaller, as you can see here in the section view. And if you take this project and optimize it even a little bit more, you could reach the how we call mini RA in here in Brazil, where I'm speaking from right now. But you can recall or define this cable as a compact version of the previous one. It's the compact version for the cable that brings all the fibers in the same tube, and this could reach a diameter of 6.8 millimeters. This is even smaller than the patch cord you're probably using in your computer right now. and you can bring up to 12 fibers. So it's very, very small for a cable that is protected for the outside environment. Moving on, and to the last and final cable for the distribution part of the network, we will talk about the 24 fibers per tube. What is the difference between this one and the 24 fibers per tube in the previous slide? Is that this one brings many tubes. You also have 24 fibers per tube, but you have many tubes, and you use it specifically to high count fiber cables. So you would be especially good, and you would attest these features such as 38% reduction in diameter and half the weight in cables up to 144 fibers, for example. And as of right now, I'm not sure if this is a lot of information for all of you, but if you do have any questions, feel free to post in the comments section. And some of our technicians who are backstage here with me, they would answer your questions or process later in the end of the presentation. Okay, now we'll talk about a little bit more about the access network. This is, for many of you, known as the last mile. This is where the last mile starts. So from the central office, we went to the outside plant with high count fiber cables. And then we reach the first net box, or the first splicing box, which in general hosts the first level splitter. From this box to the last one, to the subscriber box, which brings the second level splitter, we will use these access network, and from the net box to the subscriber, we would bring the access cables too, so the drop cables, which are the ones that I'm about to present to you right now. We prepared three types of drop cables. Like I said, drop cables are the cables used to bring the signal from the last subscriber box to the subscriber itself. And we brought here a project that hosts up to 2 fibers, and the fiber is a TB. This is why the TB, because it stands for tight buffer. And this type of fiber with a tight buffer is compatible with the field connector. A similar project, but without the element for self-supporting, and with all together in a round project, is the compact one. It is 3 millimeters thick, and it's also compatible with the field connector, since it also brings the tight buffer construction for the fiber. But I left this one for last because I think it will most likely apply to your network and the needs that you have in your network right now. Why? Because this cable has 3 main features that would apply to all sorts of complicated situations regarding the ducts and all the obstacles inside the subscriber or near the subscriber. Which are these 3 features? The first one is size. So it's very small. So this is why you have compact in its name. And so it's like 5 by 2 millimeters if you consider the self-supporting element here. And if you take this off, since this will be outside and anchored in an accessory, the smaller part, the optical part, would be 2 by 3 millimeters. So very, very small. And also the second characteristic here, the second feature, is that it brings side by side with the fiber, it brings 2 elements that bring resistance to this part of the cable, resistance enough for you to pull through ducts without the cable bending so easily. And for you to pull or push this cable through these filled almost full ducts, another feature that we need is that the cover of the cable is It has some sort of silicone and that makes it low friction or brings the low friction quality to this drop cable. So this is pretty much why this is so well accepted all over the world, not just Latin America, not just underdevelopment countries, but all over the world. And to end the part of the products, we have the termination network cables, which is the cables that are applied strictly to indoor applications. And for those applications, two cables here, both the Simplus LAN and the fiber LAN are used on vertical or MDU applications, MDU solutions. If you never heard of MDU, this stands for multi-dwelling unit. And if you've never heard of MDU Core, MDU Riser, MDU Click, all of these solutions are Furukawa's solutions. And no worries, you will know what this is by other webinars that we already did or we will do. So if you want to know more about some of these solutions, I'm moving really quick right now. So if you would like to hear a little bit more about one of these, please type in the comment section and one of our sales representative will talk to you as soon as possible. And we also have some space for Q&A in the end. You can post over there too. So starting with the Simplus LAN, the main feature for this cable, since it brings so many fibers, you can have like 64 fibers in a diameter close to 8 millimeters. So again, you can compare its size to a patch cord, but instead of bringing just one type of information or connecting just one subscriber, here we have the ability to connect 64 and with the bandwidth practically limitless. And it is also really easy to work with and to open and to expose the fibers. You can do it with your own fingers. No specific tool needed to open the tubes. The second project of cable that I just mentioned, it's used in the same vertical application, but it has some differences that makes it possible for us to work in the MDU click solution. I will explain it a little bit more later on. But the main thing you can notice from the image is that we replaced the Kevlar protection by these two elements here on the outside. They are concentrated. They're not all over the cable, so this leaves more space for the fibers, and it's easier to pull the fibers out. And when you're pulling from another level, another floor, it's much easier to do this. And also the fibers, they're not concentrated into tubes. They're also tight buffer fibers, which brings us to the main compatibility for these cables, which is compatible to the field connector. When you have field connector compatibility, you can apply it to the MDU click solution. And the last one I would like to highlight from the indoor section of the cables is the micro indoor low friction. Like I said before, all of those features for the outside low friction cable, they are here too, but you don't need a self-supporting element. So this would pretty much be the same cable, but without the self-supporting element. And since you don't need protection for the outside environment and everything, this size, the size of the cable gets smaller. So you can reach a diameter, a size of 1.6 by 2 millimeters. And it is white, which is virtually invisible for most applications in most homes that are that use white paint or clear paint. So this cable, for its size and its color, gets virtually invisible and could be applied to all of the solutions and for MDU applications. And since it's compatible with Field Connector, I would point out to the MDU click compatibility. Okay, so I've been through many products here, many types of cables. I know this is a lot of information, but I assure you this is not nearly half of our solution, half of our portfolio. I just pointed out we have a short period of time. We're approaching mostly the last part of the presentation. So I had to point out the ones that I think and the ones that we know we sold before and are applied to the most generic cases and would solve most of the problems that you pointed out in the poll in the beginning of this presentation. So, but if you would take a look in our catalog and if you look in with our sales representative and with our engineers, we could find the best suitable product for your specific need. If you have a region where the span for cables, the span between poles is much more much bigger than the ones I pointed out. We have cables for that application too. We have many others. This is the main message here. But before we move on, I would like to also show you a quick video of one of the cases we worked with.
El objetivo de este proyecto ha sido implementar el mejoramiento de seguridad ciudadana en la Municipalidad de Alto Selva Alegre, donde teníamos una alta inseguridad ciudadana. Básicamente buscando y el proyecto de innovación tenía que estar acorde a la tecnología, a los avances de la tecnología, ¿no? Que por ello se ha optado por la innovación. Los beneficios, lo que se busca es, ¿no? Estar acorde a la tecnología y a futuro, ¿no? Que la tecnología nos permita buscar una ciudad inteligente, lo que en varios sectores está implementándose, ¿no? A base de este mejoramiento con fibra óptica, lo que se busca es la tecnología. También va a ser el primer distrito que va a estar integrado, ¿no? Con todo lo que es con la comisaría ¿no? Con la Policía Nacional del Perú. Lo que se llama es en seguridad de serenazgo va a estar conectado y como también la Policía Nacional va a tener acceso directo, ya viendo las cámaras, ¿no? Lo que es con las radios Tetra, ¿no? Mediante auriculares van a estar viendo para mayor rápida intervención ¿no? de cualquier inseguridad.
Furukawa en la ingeniería de este proyecto, cuando este proyecto tenemos el requerimiento del municipio, nosotros por la experiencia de la empresa, yo pertenezco a la empresa Telefónica Ingeniería de Seguridad, es que vemos la necesidad de contar con una red industrial, con equipos que estén de acorde a las condiciones ambientales de la zona del distrito, ¿no? Temperatura, la agresividad del clima. En ese sentido, nosotros buscamos equipos que sean de carácter industrial, para montar una red GPON para un sistema de videovigilancia y altavoces, parlantes, y alerten a la población. Entonces, este proyecto, digamos, es innovador porque nosotros sobre la red GPON estamos montando toda una red de video, vigilancia y de seguridad para la población con parlantes para alerta ante cualquier eventualidad. Y parte de este proyecto también es la reacción, por eso es que tenemos radios, conexiones Tetra y camionetas para el personal del municipio pueda ir hacia el punto y atender los eventos que se presenten. Se han instalado 37 cámaras en la red, en puntos estratégicos, y se han integrado 40 cámaras existentes. Todas están a un centro de monitoreo, el cual se ha construido desde cero, y que, digamos, concentra todo esto. Hay un sistema de video wall. En una segunda fase vamos a interconectar todo este centro con las comisarías para que de manera en tiempo real ellos también puedan apoyar al municipio y atender toda esta parte de la inseguridad que se tenía en Alto Selva Alegre, ¿no?
Okay, so it's really cool to know that we are not only deploying fibers to the sake of it or just to deliver good internet services, but also to bring people to a more safe environment. To the last part, I would like to put it into context. So since you already know how fiber works, how the networks work, how which are the best products to be applied, I would like to put it into context and bring some data before we move on to the solutions itself and how do we put these products together. So the first data I would like to point out is the fiber in Europe. The data, the rise, the dramatic rise that we see on both the homes passed and the subscribers number. You can see that by September 2019, we had already reached in Europe a number of 170 million homes passed. What is a home passed? A home passed is a home that could be connected to through fiber, but is not necessarily already connected. The subscribers are represented by this blue number here, and these are the homes passed that already received and are already connected. You can see that the number of subscribers are rising much faster than the homes passed evolution. And this take rate, of course, it varies from country to country, but the main thing here to notice is that we have to activate more and more and more, and the demand from subscribers for faster internet is rising dramatically too. So we have to adjust. We have to have products that could handle that sort of take rate. One last from these five here, I would like to point out one conclusion, which is the new initiatives made by governments. This would be a much more present situation for most of you in the following years. So this would bring this home pass evolution to the next level and would accelerate the whole fiber to the home scenario. Moving on, I have a question that I hear all the time. I'm sure some of you have the same question regarding 5G or wireless applications. And if this will bring fiber application down or fiber networks down. And the answer is a big no. Why? Because for 5G to work, you would need a lot of small cells and a lot of transmission points because 5G applications, 5G technology requires a smaller distance. And for you to have smaller distance, of course, you have to have more small cells. And for you to interconnect all those cells, you will need fiber optics. So you can see here in the green part, this is fiber required to deploy 4G plus and 5G networks. So instead of killing fiber, it's actually helping fiber to rise. And also you can see all the other fiber applications there on the rise too. Why? Because if you do have fiber in your home, if you do have fiber to your computer, you will not change it to 5G because you have stable connection. Not that 5G is not stable, but it has its limitations. So when you have fiber delivered straight to inside of your home, it will not change since you already have the network. But for you guys that are deploying networks, this is good information because you can maintain your services through FTTH, and you can also be used, since your network is also an asset, you can use it to deploy small cells for 5G networks too. And these applications, the end user, like I mentioned before, today it could mean someone working in their workplace, but you never know. You never know about tomorrow. You never know if if there would be a rise on hospital applications, on farm applications, on smart cities, on IoT. IoT is on the verge too. It's all of these could be a reality tomorrow. And what is the best thing to do if you're deploying networks right now is to make it susceptible to work with these technologies. And fiber optics has it perfect because of no limit, no virtual limit for the bandwidth. And if you take care of some active and manage some end environment, you can deliver service to all sorts of applications. This is the main message here. I'm not sure if you got a little confused here, but the thing is, the message is, if you use PON network, which is passive optical networks, here today, you are prepared for tomorrow. And the last one I would like to point out in this facts section is that when you have broadband in an area, there is a study from an US university that points out that there is a significantly reduce on unemployment rates. So besides, once again, not just delivering fiber, not just delivering services, but you're also helping the community, not just by making it safer, like we saw in the case video, but also by improving their chances, the population chances of receiving information and being more qualified for the working force scenario. And the last data I would like to point out is the ones related to the pandemic effects. So we're living difficult times. I'm sure most of you are living through something that you never did before. I never imagined that I would be presenting so many webinars and working from homes for so long. And not just myself. You can see this in the US. This is a data from the USA, from people accessing internet during work days. So it was around 22.6 million, and it more than doubled after COVID. It more than doubled. And the question is, do you think that these numbers will drop back to its previous reality? Or do you think it would stay at least in the half of it? We believe, not just Furukawa, but we believe in the market that this will never get back to the same. There is a new normal being designed right now. And for this new normal, we have to be prepared. And for us to be prepared, we have to consider the uplink bottleneck. What does that mean? We always focus, not just we, I mean, the market always focus on the downlink speed, the download speed. And sometimes you can even find an alternative to fiber, which would bring the same speed for you. But there are two things you have to be very careful about. The first one is the future-proof thing. So even though the download speed for you is enough with an alternative for today, it might as well not be for tomorrow. And even for today, if you analyze the available alternatives for the uplink and for conferencing and all sorts of applications that we are working from home, this is a bottleneck. So we have to look at this from the bigger scope. So this is the last part of the presentation. Like I said before, just a quick sum of everything we already saw. The fiber and then the parts of the network, which fiber would fit in each case. We saw a case of a real customer who deployed for a safety application. And right now we saw some data, very interesting data that attests that FTTX is the network to be deployed in the future. But what are the steps that this type of network took, and where were we and where are we headed to? So the first networks were splice based on. They all over the network, you would have to make splices. As we moved along, we saw the need to deploy feud connectors in the end, feud connectors to the subscriber, so the take rate could be much bigger or much faster. And this made it the process 48% faster. Next step, which is where we are at this moment, is the pre-terminated solution. So we can use these cables with their connectors straight from the factory for your plug and play application. And this results on less errors and more homes connected. The FTTH scenario, the FTTH topology that is applied in, I don't know, 80% or the vast majority of cases is something like this. You would get out, you would bring the service out of the OLT or the central office with a high count fiber cable. Then you would reach the first splicing box, which also hosts or houses the first level splitter. And then you would move on to subscriber box, also known as NAP, Network Access Point. And from here, you would bring the drop to the subscriber. If you analyze and you take a closer look, you would see there is an X here, a X draw in the first part of the splitter. This represents a fusion splice. You can relate, every time you see a fusion splice, you can relate it to a high trained and most of the times expensive working force. So here you have the very specialized working force working until the second box. And what does that imply? If you have that sort of topology, that sort of architecture, if you reach a city, let's say the city I'm about to represent here is Johannesburg in Africa. If I want to sell my service through this city, I would have to deploy all the second level boxes, the first level boxes, and all of the cables that interconnect those boxes. Why? Because of the working force and how fast it is to do it. Since I need to make a fusion splice in the entrance of each one of these pink boxes, the thing is, if I do it on demand, if I do it every time I'm about to activate a subscriber, this would take too long. So this is why I have to invest everything from day one. So it's very complicated, and you also have a huge amount of splices. Once you do this, it works. Of course, it's the best network. Like I said before, it's the best network for you to deploy on. But there are some challenges, especially if we take on the data I just showed. We need to be up to date on the future challenges, which is how to achieve full home space potential in an efficient budget, and how to deploy and connect networks even faster and safer. This will be the holy grail for this sorts of applications. So the key factor here, or the key product, would be the one fiber distribution cable pre-terminated on both ends. Why? Because this cable would replace the cable used between the boxes. So right now, as of today, we are used to 12 fiber cables or similar situations where you have to do a splice on both ends. And by replacing for a cable with just one fiber, the networks would be lighter, and it would be much more plug and play, so much easier and faster to deploy it. This would imply on 55% reduction on CapEx investments. And if you talk about services, this would bring the investment on splicing services to 94% reduction. And also, since the cables are lighter and the working force could be even not as specialized, you can have a 63% reduction on cable deployment as well. So where do I put these products? Like I said, there are many cables. All of the cables I just showed you in the presentation, they are applied to this as well. But if you bring this key element, which is the cable pre-terminated on both ends and the pre-terminated box, we can think about the next step. Like I showed you the pre-terminated solution, you can have two alternatives for working with those pre-terminated solutions, which is on-demand deployment and fast deployment. The on-demand deployment, you can compare this to the one I just showed you, and you will see the main difference. Like the X here, you would only see one X for every 64. For each 64 subscribers, you would only have one Fusion splice, and you could deploy this second NAP only when you are about to connect somebody. Why can you do that now and you couldn't before? Because, like I said, if you would leave this box to be deployed only when the subscriber arrived, it would take too long to do this part. And since this is all plug and play now, we can do this on demand. And if we analyze the same area, for instance, Johannesburg, the first investment would be only on the first level boxes, and then you would invest in those pink boxes on demand, and this would drop dramatically the capex, or the day one investment, 2 to 3 times, and it of course would bring the return over investment much faster too. The second topology I talked about is the fast deployment version. The fast deployment uses the same products. Just a quick reminder here, these products are updated now. We just recently evolved them to to a better version of them, and not just a better, but you can apply them to different situations. So these products, you can talk to your sales representative to hear about or to receive technical material on the last version of these products. This easy deployment solution is called Easy Grow, so fast growing type of architecture. The main difference here is that all of the NAP boxes are interconnected through a one fiber cable. The main difference, if you compare it to the previous one, is that all of these NAP boxes in the first case would have to go back to the center box, which is good when you're doing it on demand. But if you want to achieve the whole city, or to prepare the whole city all at once and do it as fast as you can, this would be much easier, because you would interconnect everything by pre-terminated one fiber cables. And this was developed by Furukawa. We studied all sorts of combinations between unbalanced splitters to reach two setups, especially one containing 8 boxes. So each box would bring 8 subscribers, so 64 boxes for interconnected to one port in the first box. Or you can have 4 chains of 4 boxes. This is a different scenario, but all of them use the same concept, which is unbalanced splitter inside, to maximize and to make it easier to deploy through one fiber cables. Okay, so this is the last part, and this is something I like to compare with something we see in our daily lives. Most of the times, you have to choose between 2 of these 3 features. For instance, if you want something fast and you want it in high quality, it will probably cost a lot. It will be expensive. But if you want something fast and you want it also to be cheap, it will be probably with poor quality. But if you want something cheap and high quality, it will take a long time to get to you. So usually you have to choose between 2 of these 3. When do you not have to choose? When there is an evolution on technology. This is where we fit as a pre-terminated solution. We use all of what we learned from the entire cable portfolio I just showed you, with the next step, which is including the pre-terminated feature. And this could bring fast deployment networks by low cost and low capex, like you saw, and with high reliability and high quality throughout the network. And why do we do that? Why can I say that? Since there was an evolution, I can also bring you back to something that you are used to in your daily lives. The first cell phones They were very heavy. They would cost a lot of fortune, and their battery life was pretty much close to zero. And as we moved along to 2020, right now we have cell phones with batteries that would last half or one day. They're lighter and they do everything, including call, and for a cheaper price. What happened here? This is an evolution of technology, same thing that happened here. So this is the final slide. I'm sure for some of you, this was a lot of information to take in, and I would like to guide you through what next. You're probably wondering what now. So my suggestion, which is there might be some uncertainty regarding the COVID scenario and everything, I would say come to us for us to work together on a project. We can design a network together for no cost. You can bring us a region, something that you're analyzing and you think is feasible, but you're not sure. We'll help you design that network and draw a bill of material, a list of material required, and you can analyze financially too. Once you decide it, even though it could be tomorrow or in a month or in 1 year, after the study, we will help you train your personnel. So we will bring you trainments. We will send you also sorts of manual and technical documentation to train your personnel to deploy the fiber throughout your region and the world. Why not? I hope I brought some interesting information to you. I know, once again, that was a lot to take in, but if you have any doubts, there is a comment section. You can post your doubt over there, but you can also contact me directly through LinkedIn or email. And I hope you got out of here with an interesting perspective on fiber cables. And most importantly, I hope you all stay safe.
Thank you, Luciano. We still have a couple of minutes to answer some questions. So first, I would like to say that this presentation will be available through email. We will be sending a link to you guys. Also, if you want to contact Furukawa, there's a green button under the video page where you can schedule a meeting. And now we will answer some questions, okay? So the first one that we have is regarding the difference between the Simplus LAN cable and the fiber LAN cable. Luciano, can you help us with that?
Sure. Let me just bring out the presentation once again, just 1 second. Please, Nicholas, let me know when you can see it.
Okay, yes, it loaded. We can see it.
Okay, so just real quick, moving back to the slide here. So the main differences between the Simplus LAN cable and the fiber LAN MDU click cable. First, the Simplus LAN brings all fibers into modules, into tubes, and this sort of fiber is the 250 micrometers, the one I showed in the first slide. How is the fiber constructed? What is it? What it is made of? And here you only have the fiber in that state. And in this type of cable, it is a tight buffer construction. You can work with each fiber isolated. You can separately work with each fiber. Is tight buffer better than micro module construction? No, it depends. This is why we have different solutions. When you use MDU core or MDU riser, you would like to work with high density cables because all the splitting is down in the base of the building. In the case of MDU core, for instance, so you would need to go up with many fibers. In this case, it's better to work with this type of cable. But if you are splitting on the floors and you would like these fibers to be compatible with field connectors, this would be better to work with tight buffer fibers. I'm not sure if I answered the questions, but the main difference here I would like to point is the fiber, of course, and the traction element, which is Kevlar for the simplest LAN and our FRP for fiber LAN cable. But they both are really easy to open a section, to open a window through the cable. And there is a quick fun fact here I would like to share too, which is how to open this cable. Of course, when we first launched the simplest LAN, which was the first one, in our manual, in our guide, we pointed out some specific tools that you can use and everything, but creativity sometimes can be used for good. And we heard that a lot of our customers were using kitchen tools to open this cable. They were using cheese cutters and potato peelers to open a section to these cables. And this was very interesting. Even we as Furukawa started to use those tools in our trainings because it made a lot of sense. It was cheaper, it was faster, and since there was no razor involved and the protection, the fiber was safer, even though. So this is a quick fun fact about this type of cable.
Thank you. We have another question, which is regarding the simplest LAN. We would like to know if the color of the LSZH cable is always gray, or it can be provided in other colors.
For the simplest LAN, it could be provided in other colors. It could be blue, it could be yellow. When we talk about indoor environment, it's not as critical as the outside environment, as the outdoor environment. So for indoor, we can have a vast set of colors. And like I mentioned before, blue and yellow are alternatives to the gray scale. But also, as you mentioned, LSZH, I forgot to mention during the presentation, what is LSZH? It's low smoke, zero halogen, which is in case of fire, there is no toxic smoke being emitted from this cable since it is indoor. And since in big fires, what kills most is not the fire itself, but the smoke. So it is very important and responsible for us to deploy only cables with this feature if we're talking about indoor environments.
Thank you. And our last question, which is the most recommended drop cable, with 1 or 2 fibers to activate a customer? What is your opinion on that?
Well, you have to analyze each case scenario. You would have to understand why the person wants 2 fibers. Could be a business, could be something different. But if you ask me about the most generic case, the FTTH scenario, the best cable would be the 1 fiber count. Why? Because it will be compatible with the field connector, so you can assemble this on the field without the need of any machinery, any fusion splicing. And also, it doesn't make sense since the fiber can reach for up to 100 mega through 1 fiber. You wouldn't need 2 fibers to do it. Doesn't make sense if you're connecting just 1 customer. Like I said, if it is a business and you would like to bring 2 sorts of sources to divide in the company is one thing. But if you would analyze the FTTH most generic case, which is connecting 1 person or 1 home, the 1 fiber would be most definitely the best choice.
Thank you, Luciano. Thanks for your time. So you can follow us on social media and with our email chain, where we will be posting you regarding other webinars regarding the FPS line and also the FCS line. If you still have any questions, please reach out through the green button on the video page or contact us through email. Once again, thank you for your participation. Have a great day.
Stay
Thank you.
safe. Bye.